Hi everybody, thanks so much for joining us again for another sofa safari with Ulasaba. It's another glorious afternoon in the African bush, and we can't wait to get started with this one. It's going to be an exciting one, I think. We've got Brad up front there joining me, so he's on the tracker seat, the hot seat, and then of course hopefully we will also be switching over to the other guys, the other crew out and about as well, and that's for a little bit later. Just a couple of things before we do get started. Some important news. We will be updating you through the week again, but for the Sofa Safari starting from next week, we're going to bring it a half an hour earlier for you. So that gives us a little bit more daylight to work with, and hopefully a lot more enjoyable scenes with good light. So don't forget, next week it's going to be half an hour earlier, so 3 o'clock UK time, which is 4 o'clock South African time. All right, so don't forget that. We'll put some reminders out for you. But for this afternoon, for right here, right now, yeah, let's get going. We are in position actually, and just around the corner. We've worked pretty hard this morning to find this, and Brad up front here has done a lot of excellent tracking this afternoon, staying with the animal. So let's go and see what we've got for you. You all good there, Brad?
All good. Small log here.
You all right?
Yeah. Fantastic.
How about that, folks? How's that for a view? Magnificent young male cheetah. It's one of the special sightings for us because we don't see a lot of them, and so we've had a brief sighting of him through the week, and we've been very lucky enough that today we managed to catch up with him again, and here he is in all his glory. He's been quite active this afternoon. He's given us a bit of a run around, hasn't he, Brad?
Yeah, big time.
But it seems like he's settled nicely in the shade, so he's just catching his breath for a while, and perhaps later on, when the sun starts to drop, he might get moving again. But magnificent young male cheetah in a beautiful, beautiful condition.
A couple of months ago, he did visit with his sister, and it seems like they've split apart now. That usually takes about 16 to 18 months. So when they do break away from the mom, the litter, if there's a couple of males together, they'll form a coalition and stay together. The females will split up. Unfortunately, he had no brothers, so he's going to be alone. That's not to say he won't be successful. He just won't be as formidable as a coalition, but he'll still be able to hunt quite successfully. We're hoping that he stays around here in this area. That'll be great. Still kind of working his way around.
We have other male cheetah that come across into this part of the concession, territorial males. So as Brad says, he's got to move around and find his own way, perhaps be a little bit nomadic for the time being until he settles on a spot that he can establish for himself. So it's only one of the few times that we've actually seen him particularly in this area. Just when we approached there, you could see as we were moving with the vehicle on, he did prop up just to have a good look at what was around him, obviously not being able to hear while the engine's running, but now he's settled down into a much more comfortable and fairly typical pose for a cheetah, lying on their side like that with their head propped up. Always ever vigilant, not being as formidable as a lion, and perhaps as enigmatic as a leopard. They have to really make their way. It's a hard graft for a cheetah amongst the big cats. You can see now closed eyes, so he's relaxed a bit. He's comfortable being able to hear what's around him. It's fairly thick in this area. He's been moving through some tricky terrain. You know, typically one would imagine a cheetah preferring the open plains, a bit more open areas, perhaps some vantage points up on termite mounds or trees that he can then survey the immediate area from, and perhaps plot and plan his movements, or maybe a hunt later in the day. But for the time being, it seems as he's being nomadic through this area, he's just trying to keep out of trouble, and he's taken to some of the thicker spots here. Talking about spots, you can see his spot pattern there. One of the key distinctive features that differs him from the leopard, we know very well as another spotted catch, but perhaps more with a rosette pattern, a grouping of spots, whereas the cheetah here almost has a bit of a Dalmatian appearance to him with the single spot. Just become aware or alert to something maybe in the vicinity here. See how he stood up. Can't really see what it is from our angle, but
it's a hyena.
I trust his instincts better than mine.
There's a hyena prowling behind us here. He's coming straight here.
Okay, let's see how he reacts to the hyena.
Just behind the vehicle.
Just behind the vehicle. A lone hyena just exploring through the area, maybe picking up on the scent of him. Come to investigate perhaps whether he's got anything worth stealing. And a cheetah like this could hold his own against a single hyena. They're not really going to engage unless there's something to fight over. Just giving a low growl. Hyena's still behind us, but we just at the moment can't get an angle on him for you with the camera, but let's see what he does now. Just lurking around the back there.
The marauder. It's already tough as is for a cheetah to make its way around here and hunt successfully, and then you've got to worry about hyenas marauding.
Well, not just hyenas when it comes to the cheetah, they're pretty much at the lower end of the spectrum with the predators. So, wow, look at that lovely little yawn there. So, you know, they often have their kill stolen by leopard. They're not averse to stealing a kill off a cheetah, and lions, of course, and then the wild dogs being the other one. So, yeah, they're not really a confrontational animal. They rather leave the scene if it looks like there's going to be an engagement. Stand up to a single hyena like this, but typically as a solitary animal, you can understand not really wanting to engage because the risk of injury is too high, and therefore that will hinder their continued success, being able to hunt and look after themselves. So rather just back off and call it a day and live to fight another day, literally. We were just going into some of the morphology of the animal. Now that he's propped up, sitting nice and straight for us, you can see a very deep chest cavity, very long limbed animal, so very supple with their body, and obviously that makes for a very good machine for high speed chase, which is obviously what the cheetah is famous for, being the fastest living land mammal. That big chest cavity houses big lungs, which take in a lot of oxygen, which can then feed the muscles with oxygenated blood to really give him that burst of speed over a shortish distance, 300-400 meters maybe at top speed. And then that long rudder-like tail, which helps him with balance as he's doing those high jinking maneuvers chasing antelope through the bush.
In not to 100 km/h speed is about just under 3 seconds, and they can beat a Formula 1 car to 80 km/h. That's how quick they are.
That's some interesting stats for you. Let's see if he gets on the move now, or he settles back down where he was. Look at that tail as he flopped down there. You can actually see it's not round at all like some of the other big cats. It's actually laterally compressed, so it's a slightly flattened shape, and that lends to that maneuverability, like I said before, with the high jinking turns, counterbalancing him as he runs. Perhaps I don't know how our angle is there, Trev. Maybe we can find another little spot to try and get him on that side. Might just be wary of the hyena still being around, although it has moved off. You see how he's up again, looking.
Folks can also see the tear marks, black tear marks running down the face. Very diagnostic for cheetah. And as you mentioned, as well the spots rather than the rosettes, and it being so tall as well, just at a first glance. Excellent eyesight. In fact, one of the best of the animal kingdom. Supposedly they can see a steenbok. I'm not sure if you folks are familiar with the little steenbok. Very small antelope. Supposedly they can see that 5 kilometers away. So being in the open, of course, is much more advantageous for the cheetah. That's where it's at home.
Those tear marks that Brad is referring to also aid with their diurnal activity. They don't really hunt too much at night. Maybe on a full moon they might move through an area and perhaps be opportunistic. I've seen that in other parts, but especially in thicker bush like this, I think that would be quite a hindrance. So they limit their hunting activity to the daytime, and those tear marks suggest perhaps being able to somehow absorb some of the harsh light coming into the eye, cut through some of that haze as well. They've got amber colored eyes. Perhaps when he turns around, if he's going to have a look behind us again, that hyena still skulking around, you'll see he's got beautiful amber colored eyes, as opposed to the nocturnal cats, which have those greenish, yellowish greenish eyes.
Yeah, with regards to numbers, as far as I'm aware, in Sabi Sands we're looking at about 8 cheetah in the whole reserve. I think was the last count. And I think in the whole of Kruger National Park about 120 was the last figure that I recall. So not many at all in the whole area. They are struggling, mostly due to their habitat being lost. A lot of our grassland areas in South Africa are not conserved. About 5% of them are actually conserved, so not much area for the cheetah. They do fend a little bit better elsewhere up north. At the moment we are struggling with their populations in South Africa. Kruger seems to be the best genetic diversity. That's really the problem at the moment, is their genetics. They've been forced to kind of inbreed a little bit more than they would have if their area was larger. So yeah, we have to very much be careful about genes. You know, having the kind of same gene cheetah on a reserve can cause some problems. So big areas, bigger reserves, that's going to alleviate that problem much better. So Environmental Wildlife Trust is moving cheetahs around actually between the smaller reserves.
Here we have more of an open system reserve, so they move through freely from the Kruger National Park into the eastern parts of the Sabi Sands and then across to our concession, so quite a larger area. But that genetic bottleneck that Brad's referring to is a serious problem for them, and one of the reasons why they are protected species, and also why there are certain breeding programs in place for them. Obviously try and boost the numbers. Historically, they have been persecuted in the past. There's a hyena again. I think actually the hyenas have now become more interested in some activity further to our east. There's a lot of guinea fowl calling and maybe some alarm calls across that way. He's going to go and investigate that. Cheetah's not offering up anything for him this evening.
Stu, we have a question for you. One of our guests is asking, is a cheetah spot pattern similar to that of a leopard, that you can identify different individuals by the spot patterns?
Yes, it's a very interesting one. We typically use the whisker line, the top whisker line on a leopard for their spot pattern, on the left and right side, and we can draw up on a database a particular number. With cheetah, they also have unique spot patterns, so there are ways that we can identify specific individuals. What we often do then is rather than the whisker line, we use the actual full cheek pattern, and perhaps there's some specific identifiers on either side of the cheek. I actually worked on another reserve with a cheetah that had a very distinct Southern Cross star pattern on the one cheek, so that was a very easy identifier for that particular cheetah. And the other way we also do it is sometimes above the eyebrows, so they have arches of spots up above the eye, and sometimes those can form specific patterns that we can identify with. So long as we get a photographic example of left, right side and the frontal shot, then we can match that onto a database with a particular animal, perhaps get their DNA as well, and that's how we'll identify the cheetah. And the third way, which I've also used myself, is the spots that come down the tail actually form bands towards the end, and then typically a white tip on the end. But the band markings on the tail, you can count the number of rings on those, and that's another way you can identify particular cheetahs. Very good question though. A lot of our guests are very familiar with particular individuals here regarding leopard. We don't have too many cheetah, so it's always nice to be able to become familiar with some of them as well, and identify them at sight. It always makes for something that's quite special for guests that return again and again, and they become familiar with these individuals. Hopefully this guy, as we've said before, sticks around and establishes a territory here. Still toward the end of the rutting season. You can hear the impalas. Males are still chasing each other around there. Very late in the season. A lot of the the ewes have already been covered. But that's what that sound is there. Doesn't seem to be of any interest to him at the moment.
The cheetah's hunting style is also a little different to the lions and leopards. They've got more of a technique where they'll kind of trot into an area, into an open clearing, see if they can detect anything quickly and move in before that animal detects them, to as close as they can. and then that's when they'll burst into their full speed, and hopefully that animal panics and then he can make a kill. So yeah, a bit more different to the ambushing techniques of leopards, and you're kind of stalking to attacking with your lines. But then again, it also can adapt, different situations. So, being in a thicker area, it would probably adapt more of an ambushing technique as well, actually.
I think his spot pattern also lends to that advantage as well. Whereas a leopard has that rosette patchwork of spots that helps perhaps for him to blend into more of a dappled light setting in thicker bush. The spot pattern of a cheetah, if you ever see him moving across open ground, perhaps in a bit of a heat haze, he's a very slender animal, and so if he tries to approach his prey almost head on and very, very slowly, he almost sort of disappears into that mirage. That spot pattern is quite disruptive.
Once the cheetah's got within close range of an animal fleeing, often it trips it up with its dew claw. The cheetah's got an incredibly big dew claw in comparison to, say, other predators. Size for size, it's actually bigger than a lion's dew claw. And once it trips it up, the animal sometimes will fall, of course, and break some bones maybe, and that will further immobilize it for the cheetah. Taking corners is also not too much of a problem with the cheetah's spine. Being able to, it's got these two big muscles on either side, and it can shift direction quite easily to follow its prey, which is also usually quite fleet-footed and sidestepping him. I'm not too sure if you've seen on TV when they're running, their tails are twisting and turning at the same time. That's kind of helping him keep his momentum, much like a motorcycle taking a corner, kind of leaning into the corners, and then getting that close range to be able to tap on the ankle of the antelope or whatever. But yeah, sometimes you see it just give up for no reason, and you think, well, it got so close, why? So it's often the lactic acid buildup in their muscles which makes them completely, they have to stop. So that heat and the lactic acid, they can only run for about 400 meters on top speed.
Well, he's really relaxed nicely here in the shade. Gave us a bit of a run around earlier today, Brad, but he's looks pretty relaxed now. I think for the time being, and to make the most of the daylight that's left, we might cross over to the other group, see what they've got in store for us. Yeah, finally got to see a cheetah, so I'm very, very happy and excited. That's a beautiful way to start off today's Sofa Safari. So we're just going to hand over in a short while to the other group, and let's see what they have in store for us.
Hope you enjoyed that, folks. Cheers.
Ryan coming. And you guys are ready, you can set it up.
Alright, good afternoon guys. Welcome back. Hope you all enjoyed that little bit of time there with Stu and Brad with obviously with the cheetah. Obviously quite an incredible experience, something that's very seldom seen out these parts. So a huge kind of cherry on top before we even started, which is pretty amazing. Back with Tom and Brandon obviously, and Ryan on the camera there. And as you guys can see, once again, we seem to have quite an affinity for elephants. So we've located on a few elephant bulls, and you can hear out there, there's a lot of argy-bargy. Look at this, argy-bargy, rough and tumble. This is typical behavior of a group of bachelor elephants like this. So just, showing off a little bit, even showing off towards us in some cases. We had a nice mock charge just before we kind of crossed over to us. So yeah, amazing to see them going at their business. Obviously it's quite thick in here, but we'll see. There's a couple of them. I think we had about 8 or 9 initially, kind of just moving around. The older bulls very calm and placid. The younger boys going at it as much as they can, and as I say, very typical behavior. Here he comes, just trying to climb up a rung on that hierarchical ladder. Awesome, man. There it comes again. So as you folks can see, very theatrical. That's probably one of the best things about elephants in general. Even if we're talking about potential warning signs or anything, this is what they would always do, prior to any potential attack. They're very, very theatrical. Lots of trumpeting, lots of ear flapping. You can see them kicking branches. Almost the equivalent to a toddler throwing a temper tantrum, as you can see. So if you know what to look out for, it can be quite amusing to witness. And of course you can see him, he's pretty much preoccupied with destroying all the bushes out there, but keeping an eye on us at the same time. So sometimes we see a bit of a knock-on effect with these bachelors. If there's a bit of argy-bargy and play fighting going on, sometimes he might have lost a fight and he's now going to come and take that out on us. Amazing to just see the trees moving through there, I'm sure, in the screen, and hear all of that trumpeting. Full on kind of holistic experience, getting all of the senses going, which is what a safari is all about. Again, as many of you guys have been here before, that's what that's what it's all about. Amazing, yeah?
That is amazing. So folks, if you remember from last week, we had a beautiful big bull that was in must, which is the breeding condition of elephants, when males overproduce testosterone. With these young boys, they still do produce, their bodies produce testosterone, but the bigger bulls suppress their must cycles. But inevitably, they do still have these levels of testosterone. Now, if you're a boy, testosterone unfortunately means that you do some crazy things. Exactly what you see going on over there.
Yeah.
Maybe we get down, looks like a little bit of a gap here.
Go right through, yeah? Yeah. So what we might do, guys, we'll see if there is a little bit of a gap to get through. We'll go and try and get one more view of them. But of course, losing a little bit of light, so we won't have too much time. But have a look, and then we'll maybe just take a little bumble down and see what else we can see up ahead. Yeah, maybe let's view this guy, and then we go around. Yeah. Another bull just on the right here, guys. You can see completely calm. Definitely a slightly older bull. So as we mentioned earlier, he's probably proven himself many a time. Doesn't necessarily need to pit himself against these youngsters to prove his point. And they're busy with all the silly buggers. He's just going about his business, which is quite often, a typical trait of elephants on a normal day is very placid, nature, just calm and gentle, and as you can see, an eating machine. So constantly feeding, and that's all he's concentrating on at this stage. So very cool for some of you guys who have been following our sofa safaris. Obviously, we've kind of touched on the elephant bull social system or social dynamic in the earlier drives, and going through into seeing some breeding herds, as Brandon mentioned in the last few drives. Nice to see them again now, just so you can actually see the very clear distinction between them. Of course, one of the things we noticed, there's not a single youngster in this group. No juveniles, no babies. That is very typical to see with those breeding groups. So these are just all the bulls, generally a male in a breeding group, maybe between the age of 12 to 14 years. He's going to be pushed out of that breeding group of females, and he's going to come and join a group of males just like this, where essentially he will learn how to become a male elephant. He's learning all the vital skills of fighting, as we've seen now, which will enable him to one day take on another bigger suitor and win himself some mating rights in the process. So amazing to see the actual kind of process and the very distinctive groups here, as we've said. What do you think? Going to go down to Stinga for last night? Huh? Yeah. Okay, guys, I think we're gonna leave these bulls in peace. Well, this guy at least. The others have made a big mission off to the east, which is behind us. We're gonna keep going down now and maybe head towards a dam, which might be quite familiar to some of you, and just kind of see out this last bit of light. Beautiful. Brandon's just mentioned, guys, have a look at that reflection. Absolutely perfect in the water there. And they're coming to drink, which is even better. So our other team was quite far afield this afternoon, all the way up in the northern reaches of the reserve. We're very close to home here at the moment. Some of you guys might have just glimpsed the tree house behind us, the tree house suite. Oh, there's the bulls screaming again. which is on the bank of the Skwenga Dam, which is our kind of very prominent watering hole in this region. And we've had quite a few elephants moving through here this afternoon, but it's the first time we've laid eyes on the a small breeding group here. So immediately, as we've said, you can see those youngsters, and we know this is a female-dominated group.
Ryan, I don't know if you can show our guest, just the last female elephant doesn't have any tusks. Okay, she's a tuskless female. Genetic, unfortunately. It happens. You do see it, not commonly, but it seems more and more common. The larger bulls that typically would have passed on their genetics, unfortunately, over hundreds of years their numbers have lessened. And it's more common now to see elephants with no tusks or one tusk, okay, coming through. Short tusks, stumpier tusks, not as good ivory as what we consider from 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's a female that's sitting with no tusks whatsoever. It could mean that life is a little bit more difficult because an elephant's tusks are tools that they use for stripping bark. Okay, digging and stripping bark is a very important tool. So it would have meant that she would have lost a greater proportion of that type of nutrition. But I have, as I've been led to understand and what I've seen, is that they are actually bullies in many cases, that they bully other elephants into giving up strips of bark, etc. So they become quite aggressive.
Unlikely that you guys can hear that, but we've got a spotted hyena calling out in the distance, pretty much in that direction where Ryan is facing the camera. But just a lovely kind of, hauntingly beautiful sound, very typical of the bushveld. Once again, many of you guys would have heard that in your time here. And it just really brings it home, sitting here next to this watering hole. It's a lovely group of elephants, and hearing that, as I mentioned earlier, it completes that holistic cycle. It makes you really feel this sense of tranquility and peace. And of course, a completely different time of day now, going into the evening. We're going to start seeing animals like the spotted hyenas getting up to their business, going out looking for food, looking for potential animals to hunt, and of course also looking for animals to steal kills from. So it's definitely changing now. Things will quieten down a little bit. All the birds are having their last call and their last opportunity to advertise and kind of stake their claim to territories and to females. And then eventually it will settle down, and we'll just start hearing the hyenas calling, maybe the odd leopard, maybe lions bellowing out in the distance. So a beautiful time that we're going into now. And I think those elephants have left us quite timelessly there. We might just keep going down along the fringe of the dam here. We pretty much have lost most of our really good light, but maybe just to give you guys a last little taste, we'll just keep driving down on the western side of the dam, and you guys can soak it all in as much as possible until our next week. So we won't be saying goodbye just yet, but let's have a look. What's that, buddy? Back. gorgeous, eh?
Oh, yeah.
So guys, there you can see Rock Lodge in all her glory, perched up on the hill there. You can imagine the views from up there, absolutely beautiful. Even just here, you know, sitting with this last little bit of light, seeing all the autumn colors, how the kind of environment has changed even in the time that we've been doing our sofa safaris. We do have some more elephants through here, but just kind of feeding along in the bush quite quietly and calmly. You might just be able to get a glimpse. But I think with all that being said, obviously short and sweet from our part, we've all been receiving, you know, many messages from you guys, from many of our guests have been time and time again mentioning that, you know, you were supposed to be here at this time and how much you'd love to be here, and we hope that this has brought you a little bit closer, obviously during these very strange and kind of trying times. We hope that this has brought a bit of light to your week and set you up for your Monday afternoon. And yeah, we obviously, as always, very happy to be doing that for you guys and to be sharing this all with you. So from myself, Tom, and Brandon, and Ryan behind the camera there, all the best for the upcoming week. We'll see you on Monday. And just a little reminder, the times have changed slightly. We're going to be going, I think it's an hour earlier at this stage, half an hour earlier at this stage. Sorry, there we go. Thank you, Ryan. So that's 3 o'clock UK time and 4 o'clock South African time. I hope I got that right. I think I did. And yeah, all the best, guys. Much love.
Much love, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.